Hello, everybody. Welcome to another day live at the Waterhole. My name is Taylor McCurdy, and I'll be hosting you for the next couple of hours. I'm looking forward to today. Hopefully, we're going to have lots of wonderful animals gracing us with their presence. For those of you that have just joined us for the first time, this is a live and interactive Waterhole show. And if you'd like to ask me questions or send through any comments, there's a couple of ways that you can do it. You can head over to the YouTube chat stream. You can just check out the Wild Earth page and you'll find live at the Waterhole and you can comment there, but that's only until 1 o'clock. Otherwise, you can head over to the Wild Earth website and look for the question tab and send your questions that way. But as I always do, I'm going to just give it a minute or so just to see who is joining. So say hello, tell me where you're from and what you're hoping to see. It's looking very quiet and dismal here at Okukuyo in Namibia. It's funny how the bush ebbs and flows, and sometimes it's busy, and other times it's really quiet. You can just see a kudu in the far left-hand corner moving around. Maybe it will come down for a drink. Otherwise, the resident birds, of course, are here. And we'll see. I would maybe like to see a Cory bustard today. Oh, let's have a closer look at the Egyptian geese goslings that are moving at the lower end of the dam. They're just moving from left to right in the center of the screen. There's also a couple of springbuck just around the water's edge. They camouflage so well. And there we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Are there 6? I think there's 6. I'm trying to remember how many there were initially. We'll wait till they move, scatter all out into the open, so they could be on top of one another. I thought there were 7 2 days ago. I didn't count them properly yesterday. We only saw them briefly, or was that the day before? All these days blur into one another. I just find it amusing that the goslings are off doing their own thing and the parents are far away. I can't say that I've ever noticed this behavior. Egyptian geese are known for being protective parents, really good parents, in fact. Well, I suppose they can do the best with what they have. Oh, no, there's 7. Oh, cool. Okay, all 7 are here, which is amazing. They are walking in the direction of one of the adults. Catherine, you've said hi, Taylor. You hope to see some things to cheer you up. Me too. I really, really hope so. I'd like to see a Cory bustard here, and I hope we get to do some birding in some of the other locations. Elephants, of course, always great to watch. And who knows, maybe we have a sneaky big cat. But only time will tell. We'll probably pop around to some of the other cameras, even if there's nothing there, just to have a look around and kind of see what's happening. Right, let's go check out what the weather is like, and that could give us an indication of what we could expect today. There we go. Temperatures not as high as they usually are, but it is warm in Kimberley and Okukuyo today. So we're now at Kim's Camp, which is in the Timbavati Game Reserve, Nature Reserve, sorry, Timbavati Nature Reserve. And this is the first time I'm actually having a closer look at the lilies, the lotus flowers that are growing here. I think this is the perfect spot to see some birds. It's a pity we don't have a heron standing here. And the water looks fairly clear. Well, at least at this section, you can see how shallow it is. You can also see how much debris is beneath the surface. Lots of sticks and twigs, which is, of course, to be expected. It would be really wonderful if these lily pads can just extend maybe by threefold. That would be quite nice. We'll definitely bring in a whole host of bird species that will utilize these. And of course, you can hear the red-billed buffalo weavers and a ring-necked dove calling in the background. It's a given when you come here to King's Camp. Let's have a scan around the waterhole. Let's see what else we can find. Stella, you were wondering about the water lilies and if they'd be able to grow away from water. So no, they are specifically an aquatic plant species, so they wouldn't survive without being submerged in water. And with water lilies, as well, you have to be very careful where you grow them, because if you try to grow them in a water source where there's flowing water, they won't do very well. They need to be in an environment where it is quite still, and that's uh, where they really do thrive. It's crazy to see the leaf development of the lilies, because they kind of unravel and eventually float up to the surface. Yeah, all the birds are chirping really nicely now. There's also another great area where we can see all sorts of things. You can see there's also some papyrus on the left-hand side. There's a sneaky pool of water there too. I bet there are plenty of frogs. We're still just having a little scan around. Not much just yet. The grass is looking so lovely and lush today. There's been a great amount of, not that much rain, but we've had a couple of really good sort of stagnated showers almost like once a week now. And she's just keeping the grass all chopped up, and it's thriving. You can see the hide just off to the left, which is great. Can you imagine? You enter, I imagine, a stairway and you go underground, and then you can sit there and photograph any wildlife that comes around. But it's so important to be quiet, sit nice and still to not disturb anything. But we're going to head over to Madikwe Game Reserve now. It looks like a couple of elephants are on their way. Here we go, one elephant and a warthog. This could be an interesting interaction. Normally the warthogs are quite nervous around the water's edge, especially with the elephants around. And maybe we can have even a slightly, there we go, we're going in, we've got the great minds think alike. So, an older bull, you can see, but still a bit anxious and interested in what the warthog was doing. So how he was twisting his trunk. Something must be there that the warthog is loving, and that's why it's so reluctant to move out of the elephant's way. Warthogs, I wonder what it is. It looks like it's just, I don't know if it's actually feeding on the grass roots or if there's something else there. I would rather be eating the nice green grass. And you see the elephant turns his head and still just looks at the warthog. See how his trunk is actually turned and facing in the direction of the warthog? So these are all little subtle indications that he is paying attention uh, to this warthog, and that these are subtle signs that people typically miss when they are looking at elephants. Everybody just thinks that a head shake and wide open ears shows when an elephant is annoyed or upset, but in fact you can pick up some smaller signs before you even get to the more obvious signs. Bull, you're asking if I feel any better. For those of you that don't know, I've had a migraine building up for the last 2 days, and it hit me in the early hours of this morning, and I didn't quite make it through the whole of the sunrise safari. I'm definitely feeling a little bit better. I managed to knock myself out and have a nap. It's still lingering, but much better than earlier today. So thank you so much for the wishes and for everybody else that has wished me well. I should be up and ready, rearing to go for the sunset safari as well. And then Casey Wolves, you've asked. Oh, you've also just said that you hope I'm feeling better, and you're hoping that we'll see some lions lying about. Wouldn't that be great? That would be amazing. I'm definitely going to try and get to the Kambula males later this afternoon at Chitwa Chitwa if they haven't moved off of the property. So fingers crossed, as I'd love to see them all together. So if we don't see them now, Casey Wolves, you're going to have to hang on tight until the sunset safari. And Sean, you're wondering, do matriarchs, so female elephants that have the sort of highest ranking status, they are responsible for leading the herd? And you've asked if they ever walk without their herd, even for a little bit. Of course they will. They're not going to travel huge distances on their own, but what you see with elephants is they spread out while they feed. And sometimes they could be a few hundred meters apart from one another. But because of the way that elephants communicate, that distance is actually not that great. They can put some space between them and the herd, but for the most part, the herd is going to try and keep up, as they typically would set the pace and decide in the direction that they're going. What is wrong with this elephant's trunk? Do you see that? How it's kind of bent at an angle closer to the tip of the trunk. We'll see now when he stretches it down. I wonder what on earth happened. Well, there's no bones in the trunk, so it must have got damaged in some way or another. Hard to tell how. Maybe something that happened when it was younger, or he could have also just been born that way. Maybe it's a deformity. But he manages nonetheless. I would like to see how he eats. I'm sure he has a technique that he uses. And it's definitely not affected his growth. As you can see, he's an impressive individual. And we have a second bull coming over. Keeping a distance just slightly from the other bull. Having a quick look around, see if anyone else is coming through. Nope, just an Egyptian goose, and I'm sure the blacksmith lapwings will be around somewhere.
We all know the struggle of finding the perfect gift. But what if you could give them an unforgettable experience? Something truly extraordinary. Introducing Nature Eye. Fly a real drone remotely at iconic locations, witnessing the beauty of nature like never before. Sign up to be an explorer and you could win one of these experiences yourself. Visit natureeye.com today.
The impalas are really just enjoying grazing. They're going to be having to a lot more feeding than if they were feasting on the longer grasses. The grass is quite short. It doesn't I don't think it gets very long. Well, not if all the animals constantly keep working on it. Catherine, you said that you wish you could lie down in that grass. It looks so soft. Me too. But I also wonder, is it a little bit prickly? But that would be a lot of fun. And then Mara Mama, you've asked which animal do I wish people would pay more attention to? Uh, so it's not going to be necessarily some of the big iconic animals. The reason why I say this is because they get a lot of exposure, as is. It's the same thing goes for animals that are under threat, like pangolins, just as one example. So they do get a lot of exposure. So I wish people would pay more attention to all the smaller things, arthropods, amphibians, and just understand how important they are to our ecosystems, and that without them, the ecosystem would collapse. And that's really important. And as humans, we obviously don't typically, not all of us, but I think we're like taught as youngsters that spiders and other and then insects and frogs are gross. We don't want them in our homes. Same thing goes with snakes. People kill them, but they all have a specific role within their ecosystems. So I think just having a greater understanding about the smaller things and how ecosystems actually work would be what I want people to pay more attention to. Look how the Impala ram, there we go, he's vocalizing. Look how he's herding all the females. He's not doing very well because they've divided in half now. And you'll see, it always makes me chuckle with the rams because they try so hard to keep them together. And then the herds them in one direction. As soon as he turns to go the other way, they just will come back to where they were and eat and really do what they want. I don't know why he's being so protective over the girls now. It's not like it's mating season. That's still up and coming. Normally starts around April, sometimes end of March, and can extend into May. So he's keeping a herd for no reason. But at this time of the year, you can see more individuals of males and females all socializing together, not necessarily strong, defined herds that we see during the ratting seasons. So Phil from Brighton, you were wondering if is practicing geophagy and osteophagy a sign that something is missing from their diet? The warthog was also nibbling on the soil. So yes, absolutely. And this area that we're at the moment, we've seen not osteo, geophagy being performed a lot. If you don't know what geophagy is, it's when animals will eat soil directly to try and get in any minerals that are lacking from their diets. They can do it any time of the year, but we do see this behavior as well as the osteophagy, which is the act of chewing on bones again to gain minerals such as calcium and phosphorus. So that would happen typically or more often in dry season, just because the plants are pretty much at the end of the line before the rain starts. So they're not as palatable. Their nutrients aren't as high. So it's valuable for them. So we've seen zebra, warthogs, elephant, the impala. They all like it around here. So this open area is mineral rich. Here's a wonderful question from Gunnar. You said, is being in a harem guaranteed that you are going to mate, or are the females in the harem still having to fight for uh, mating rights within the family group? So what basically happens is it's quite a short. Okay, let me start like this. When you're a male and you are able to win females over and find yourself a territory, the amount of herds of females that are going to pass through is going to really be dependent on where your territory is. So the the sort of high use zones being areas around water holes, because impala are water dependent animals. They need to drink every single day. Those are going to be the preferred spots. Naturally, you're going to see more females coming through. So the rams are going to compete for these spaces, and only the fittest and the strongest are going to be able to hold on to these spots. However, you can imagine if you're in an area like this, you're going to be challenged more frequently than if your territory was in a less favorable spot. So it's a hard job for these boys. I mean, they're constantly trying to protect the herd, right? They're trying to herd them around to make sure that they don't go wandering off and end up with another male. And then of course they've got to defend. He's got to defend his territory. So he's running around. He's vocalizing. He's chasing other males away. Perhaps he's even engaging in battle, and they're head bashing one another. Oh, goodness. So you lose condition really quickly. You barely have any time to eat. And when you're not feeding properly, you get weaker. Therefore, you could be, knocked off of the throne quite quickly. So that's going to be it. The males will mate with multiple females. I mean, he chases them around, and it's a very quick process. And the females are not always willing and wanting to mate with the males, but eventually he can wear them out. So one ram in a harem might not have the opportunity to mate with all the females. And when a new male comes around, he's going to do the same thing. He's going to try and mate with as many of the females as possible. Again, this keeps him really busy. So it really just depends. But a lot of the times, if you ever have the chance to watch it, it's so entertaining. The girls just run loops and laps around them, and they make them work really hard, and that tires them out too. So if a really big dominant male were to last in a herd for 2 weeks, I think that that's a pretty good amount of time. And then you maybe get knocked out, and you could join a bachelor group, so just the boys, where you can focus on feeding. There'll probably be a little bit of sparring here and there, and then. And then the more inexperienced rams will move off into unfavorable areas. They might not even mate that season. So it just depends. And then the same thing goes for the much older rams. I suppose they could also start losing interest in mating with the females, just purely because they aren't able to compete with the younger, fitter individuals. So I suppose the answer there is no, in short. But I can't do anything in short. And then I just hopped over to the YouTube chat. Dark Main Lover, you said, what is the rarest animal that I've seen at the waterholes? So WildEarth has access to a number of different waterhole cameras, and they have partnered up with AfriCam too, which has got cameras, gosh, all over the world. And and then that gives us to access to special things too. I'm trying to think of what the rarest animal I've seen. I mean, we've seen all the common ones. It's more likely than not going to be a bird. So the pied avocet is a really good one. You just don't see them all the time. Dark rain mother, if you're not familiar with that bird, you can have a quick Google of it. But we see it at Tau Lodge, which is the other water hole in Madikwe. And then the other day at Rosie's Pan, we were watching red-billed quelias, and it was so fascinating because briefly was an individual that flew down that had a pink head, and I thought, is that can't be a red-headed quelia? I mean, yeah, really, because I was like, well, they don't really occur here, and I thought that's unusual. And then I opened my bird app and I was scrolling through red-billed quelia, and then an image popped up, and the caption is an unusual pink-headed form, which was amazing. So I'm 99% sure that's what I saw. So it's not necessarily rare, but it's an uncommon color variation to see. So I was just sad it wasn't quick enough to snap a picture of it, because that's a first for me in my guiding career. It's quite possible that I've maybe forgotten something, but not necessarily a mammal species. I'm just trying to think at Old Donyo, which is another one of the Africam cameras. Uh, Seeing they're called the non-striped ground squirrel. I think that's what it was called. That was really awesome to see. I've never seen them before, so that was new. Again, they will be quite common, I suspect, around Amboseli and maybe even the Savo areas and Oldonyo. But that was quite cool. It was something that I hadn't seen before. So it's a bit tricky to say, but maybe I've missed something. I'm trying to think what else has been a goodie. I mean, I saw Cape Shovelers for the first time at Camphis Dam, so that was amazing. Not that they are uncommon. I just hadn't come or been in an area where I could see them. I suppose I have, but it's not lucky enough.
Step into a world of discovery as you join Eco Training's renowned courses in the heart of Kenya's Masai Mara. These courses are the perfect way to gain a deep understanding of the African bush, even if you have limited time. Don't miss out on this incredible opportunity to experience the wild in a meaningful and life-changing way. Enroll today and embark on a transformative journey with Eco Training in Kenya's Masai Mara, the leading force in conservation education.
It's just wonderful how 1 minute there's no elephants around, and then the next they're all here, all the bulls. Look at them, they're all doing different things. I love the one on the right, there's head on his trunk. Another one, well, with just everything hanging out. I don't know how to put it, super relaxed. Another one with his trunk hanging over his tusks. Oh, that's very entertaining. Now, let's see, there's going to be an interaction here between the. Oh, there we go. Everybody's interacting with one another now. You can see this is quite playful, how one elephant is sticking his trunk in the other one's mouth. A lot of the time, this is how elephants will greet one another. I'm so glad that we as humans do not do this. Can you imagine walking up to someone to say hello and you stick your hand or finger in their mouth? Not great. There's quite a tussle going on now. You can see that bull on the right hand side, just how much bigger he is than the rest of them. He doesn't look like he's too bothered watching the three youngsters all push and shove one another around. Mama Mara, oh, sorry, Mara Mama, you're wondering now how would I handle working with a team of people who have different opinions about how to handle sightings? Well, it is really tricky, but at lodges, again, it really just depends on the lodge, and I find that higher end lodges are more strict and quite often have training programs in place where even when guides are working, they are still constantly being monitored and assessed just to make sure that they're upholding the standard of the company. And then there's going to be very set sort of rules in place. They'll say no off-roading for elephants, right? Then it doesn't matter what your opinion is. There's no one is allowed to go off with elephants, and if you do, there will be consequences for your actions. They might also say, for an example, if a leopard is in a tree, you can 25 meters, or you have to keep a distance of 25 meters away from that tree. If you are found to be doing the opposite, there will be consequences. So again, I just find no, it's not all higher end lodges. I've worked in them. I've also been to camps all over. I'll just use South Africa for an example of different levels with different types of guides. And you're obviously allowed to have your own personality, but if there are rules and regulations and you don't follow them, essentially you're going to be held accountable for them. And it's one of the things that you see all the time when you either have a rangers or a guides meeting, if you will, whether it's just at the lodges or even like for example in the Sabi Sand, a lot of the guides from different lodges will get together. It depending, I don't know, there's no set in stone how often it has to happen, and talk about things, and that's where guides will discuss issues and whatever. And yeah, so it's such a tricky such a tricky thing to handle. But again, that's why it's important for you as a safari guide to make sure that your ethics are at the highest standard. And if there are rules and regulations, which there normally are, that you follow them. You can't be managed and babied all the time. Becoming a safari guide is quite a responsibility. A lot of people don't realize this, but you're responsible for your vehicle and your guests. And if anything goes wrong, you will be held liable. And I think a lot of people forget that. And it's all fun and games to view, wildlife and vehicles are on foot, but when something goes wrong, and it doesn't happen very often, there will be a full on investigation. So you've always got to make sure that you keep your plate clean. So can you imagine if by some small chance something does happen to you and your guests while you're on safari, and you have a record for being a cowboy and not following the rules and getting too close to animals, etc., well, you're going to find yourself in hot water because you've already got this reputation, and now you can't say it was a freak accident, blah, 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 whatever the case may be. So that's why I say to people, just make sure you watch what you do, watch what you post on social media, because you will be judged for it if anything goes wrong. And normally it's only when something goes wrong that all these things start to come out. So yeah, you're going to manage yourself. And yeah, and it's difficult because then sometimes you get people pressuring you to do something that you don't want. So you just need to be strong enough and have all your ducks in a row to be able to explain, this is why I won't do that. So that happened. It's happened to me multiple times in sightings where I'm behaving a certain way and somebody else does something completely ridiculous, which definitely breaks some of the rules, or and guests are like, well, how come we can't do that? And I'll say, well, you don't want to bash the other person, but you can explain to them in a nice way why it's probably not the best idea to do that. And for the most part, people understand as long as you can explain it so they can go, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Uh, because that's one of the trickiest things. And that's where I find it actually tricky to handle in East Africa when you're in these big national parks, and you also have just people who are not professional field guides. Maybe they're just coming in for day trips, not to say that they aren't great guides, but they've got this pressure. They're doing a 1 day safari with guests to try and see everything, so boundaries are then pushed, and you just can't behave like that. So it's a difficult one to deal with, but it's definitely manageable, and it's been done for years and years. The Egyptian geese coming around now. The bulls are finally splashing about and having a drink. Well, here's another great question, Mara Mama. Thank you so much. You said, what are safari guides taught about animals approaching them, and at what point can you use a rifle? So, for those of you that don't know, when you become a walking guide, a trails guide, it is required that you carry a high caliber rifle in areas with dangerous game, and
Whether you're a retiree, a recent graduate, or a professional seeking a change, the 55-day eco-training program is for you. With the coaching of experienced training guides, you'll embark on an unforgettable adventure that will give you a deep understanding of wildlife, conservation, and African cultures. If you sign up locally or internationally using this promo code, you'll receive 2,000 Rand off.
as you get more experience, you find an even better way to deal with certain things. So ideally, depending on the training school, what kind of training you receive, you're going to get mixed information. Every person is different. I now try and err on the side of caution because I've seen how easy it is for us to take advantage of wildlife and abuse privileges like off-roading. So I try and be as sensitive as I can. And then when walking, when you're doing your training as a guide to become a walking guide, a trails guide, you have to do encounters. So you intentionally approach wildlife because you need to learn how to handle situations. It's not to uh, um, try and initiate a reaction from an animal. Like you don't want to entice an elephant to charge you just so that you can get experience on what you could do when an elephant charges you. Do you know what I mean? The idea is that you view animals on foot from a distance and leave without them even knowing that you were there. That is the definition of a successful encounter. Now, of course, there's going to be some situations. There's no set in stone rules of how to approach animals because every single animal is going to behave differently depending on there's just too many variables to have something written in stone, and that's why it's important that you watch behavior, that you are competent in track and sign, because then you're able to distinguish, okay, is this elephant herd just been here recently by their tracks? Are we going to bump into them? You need to know your surroundings very well. Where are the water holes? That type of thing, because that could, of course, determine what animals you might bump into, but then you also have to remember that you can bump into anything anyway. So it's like there's a lot of variables that you have to take into consideration. Um, so it is hard work for guides. It's not as easy as I think the industry makes it out to be. Um, yeah, so when using a rifle, sorry, Mara Mama, again, I can't do anything in short because I like to explain different scenarios because there's not always a right or wrong answer. And, then you can make a decision for yourself. Uh, I only know a handful of people that have had to use their rifles on walks. And sometimes, I mean, if for me, for an example, I'll just use these. I've only ever had to chamber my rifle twice. So not pulling the trigger, but actually loading a round into the main chamber and I was aiming. Obviously, it was with hippos, and then I had an encounter with lions. And then 11 years, and I've walked lots. I haven't, I've walked in so many different areas in different countries, and I'm pretty lucky to have the experience that I do on foot. And in those 2 years, I've only had to do that and it should probably be higher, but I've managed to get out of situations. But I've also not, touch wood, not had too many uncomfortable situations on foot. But then again, you might just get somebody else that has had a lot, and it's not necessarily because they're doing anything wrong. Um, that's how it works sometimes. And again, if you have to pull the trigger and put an animal down, there will be a full on investigation. They will find, were you trailing the animal intentionally? Did you? There's a whole list of things, right? Did you give the animal a fair chance to stop? And then again, there's a long list of things that they're kind of going to go through, and I'm not going to go through all of them. So you have to really make the decision, right? Is this the right thing, or am I being a bit gung ho? And I find that with guides, that when you have a rifle in your hand, all of a sudden it gives you this sense of power, like you're invincible. But rifles fail. And then again, because of investigations that take place when an animal is put down, then it doesn't happen very often, that you could land yourself in a spot of trouble. So you got to be careful. So like I said, you don't want to get too close. Again, I bumped into animals just a few meters away and had absolutely no idea it was there because the vegetation might have been a bit thick or whatever the case is basically. So yeah, so it just depends. Every animal's slightly different. There's a kind of a barrier. They say when the animal crosses that barrier in your mind, that's when you're allowed to pull the trigger because they want the animals. A lot of animals will run, 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 and then stop last minute. We kind of moved away from the term mock charge. That's an old, sort of outdated thing to say now because a charge that could maybe doesn't look so serious can very quickly turn into something serious. So yeah, so we don't really use the word mock charge anymore. You can hear the Deirdre's cuckoo quite nicely. Canine Girl, you've asked what is the hardest situation that I've been in within my training? I'm gonna wait. Canine Girl, are you talking about in my training, like when I was training to become a safari guide? Or just my constant ongoing training because I still obviously I train all the time. I'm constantly learning. I renew certain qualifications. Or are you talking about when I train people to become guides? That thing, because there's quite a few different things I can go into, but I'll wait for your response. Isn't it just so relaxing just listening to the sounds of nature? Not very many people talking from the lodge, which is also really nice. Catherine, you're wondering if I've ever been in a dangerous situation because guests didn't listen, and how do you deal with that or avoid that? Uh, So it does happen, and yes, I have. So that's why it's also important as guides, and if there are any guides here, you've got to keep an eye on your guests. And a lot of the time, people don't do things maliciously. They just don't think. They're so excited, right? It might be the first time that they're seeing these animals, and the excitement just takes over. So I've had it a couple of times where guests have wanted to reach out and say, touch an elephant or a lion or a leopard that's walking, past us. And obviously, I always remind people while I'm in sightings, like, okay, if is everyone comfortable, firstly, and if this lion does come past the vehicle, just remember to sit really still. Don't stick your arms and legs out the vehicle. And try and keep your voices down. Let's just enjoy the moment. Take videos though and pictures, that type of thing. And I've had people that just can't help themselves and they try and reach out. And when I was very young, I had a guest tell touch an elephant as it sort of came past. Thank goodness the elephant did not react. I don't think he touched it particularly hard, but I did have to chat to him afterwards because he kind of bragged about it. And I just very politely told him that that is an unacceptable behavior and the consequences of doing that. And if the elephant were to react, it's not going to react to just him, it will react to the entire vehicle. So he's putting everybody else's lives in danger. And normally, when you say something like that, obviously you're polite about it, but you also need to be stern because otherwise, if you're not stern, I'm not talking about like, yelling at a person, they might be likely to do it again. I have taken guests back to camp before because of some horrifically unruly behavior, and they were it's just a complete nightmare, and I could not control them. And it's not like I don't try, and anybody that knows me that I can be really intimidating if I want to be. So I did. I took them back to the lodge. I dropped them off, and I said, unfortunately, you'll not be going out on another game drive with me. And I went to the lodge manager. I also got the general manager involved, and I explained the situation to them, and they had my back. I had evidence of what they were doing, which was great. And they just said, unfortunately, you will not be going out on any more activities because you've broken the code of conduct and the forms that you basically sign when you get to a lodge. And obviously, they were angry and annoyed and frustrated. Some were really embarrassed because it wasn't all of them, but unfortunately, everybody has to deal with it. So yeah, so that I've only ever done that once though. Um, I've also had people trying to do ridiculous things like taking selfies. Also, again, it happened to be with lions as they're walking a pride in an open area, and the pride lions just moving around. And some of the youngsters kind of got up, and they were sub-adults. And sub-adult lions can be so cheeky and are far too curious. And you really got to watch them. And these guests were kind of like leaning out of the car. So naturally, the sub-adult lions were looking at them, going, "What on earth are you doing?" And came closer. And then I had to tell them, like, "Hey, like, can you see that lion there? See, that's very interested in you." And then people's eyes go really big like this for the most part, and then they sit quietly. So I suppose it just depends on how you handle it. I think every single guide in their entire life is going to be dealt some, I don't want, without sounding horrible, but difficult guests. And yeah, but just remember that again, if you're a guide in good standing and you're not known to be cowboyish, and you do run into these situations, your head guide or senior guides or lodge managers or whatever will absolutely have your back. I know there's the term the customer is always right, but when you're dealing with wild animals and the safety of other people and your safety, then unfortunately that kind of trumps the cards. But like I said, it very rarely happens. Most people just want to come out and have fun, and for the most part, it's kind of innocent. If you don't know, for those of you that have never been on a safari before, you don't just jump in the car and go out. There is a safety briefing that guides will give you before you head out, and you just jump on the car. I try to keep my safety briefing short and sweet. Again, people are so excited. They are not really always listening to what you want to say. So the more long-winded you make it, that you're going to lose the attention of your guests. So I do just the very important things, and then I reiterate in a sighting too. And it's not don't stand up. It's like as you're getting into a sighting, and this is having the ability to park the vehicle in a good position. It's not always it's not all. What am I trying to say? It's not always the case that you can park very nicely because depending on where the sighting is. But if you can do that, then you'll more likely than not have people want to stand up because they can see. So these are some things that we teach guides on how to park a vehicle. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's actually a very important guiding skill to have. What else? So yes, and then again, if you nobody likes to be told no, right? So you got to try and do it in a way where you don't have to use the word no, unless you absolutely have to. Um, so, like for example, if we're approaching a sighting and there are lines and the guests have been so chatty and laughing quite loudly, I don't mind. You can be as loud as you want in the vehicle while we're driving around. Like have fun, talk, do your thing. You don't have to sit in silence. And when we are approaching a sighting, all I'll do is I'll just lower my voice. I'll change like the way that I'm behaving if I've also been laughing and giggling. And it's amazing to see how people just mimic you. So all of a sudden you say, oh, okay, so just around the corner there's a pride alliance. And you start to do that and you start to talk to them in a softer tone. And without even telling your guests that you have to, lower their voices, they're also lowering their voices. So again, it's all very important guiding techniques and soft skills that you learn, and that's what I think is important to focus on as guides, especially when you are new to the industry, and that you can essentially get your guests to do whatever you want, not manipulate them, but without being a Debbie Downer and being a dampener on the safari vibe, if you will.
I started watching WildEarth during COVID. I decided that I wanted to study more, and I saw that Eco Training Pridelands was doing courses, and I decided to do the 8-week online theory course at the end of last year. There's just so much out there to learn and to experience.
Sign up for an Eco Training digital course today with the promo code to receive 200 Rand off.
And see all the impala now splitting up, desperately trying to come in for a drink, and then being sort of ushered away by the Ellies. And then Canine Girl, just going back to the question you asked earlier, you said within my own training as a guide. I think, oh goodness, I'm just trying to think of a really, really good example. Uh, I, I sh- hmm. So unfortunately, when I first started guiding, I was not, I don't know, you're kind of at the bottom of the food chain, if I can put it like that. And sometimes, it's not always the case, but I unfortunately was in this position where I was tested and pushed to do things that were not great. Like at one point, I had to wash 10 vehicles. It's like they do these tests to kind of just push your boundaries so that you react in a bad way, if that makes sense. So keeping my cool a lot of the time was difficult for me because I'm quite a hot, fiery individual, and that can become quite tricky. Uh, the training side of things, I didn't mind it so much. Advanced rifle handling is difficult. So that's the qualification. One of the things you have to get uh, to be able to walk legally with a rifle. There's a whole bunch of paperwork, of course, but you have to pass this advanced rifle handling. Again, it's not a government necessity, but the Field Guides Association of Southern Africa require you to do it. And I really did struggle with that, just trying to build up the muscle memory. I'm pretty strong, so the weight of the rifle was never a problem, and I have a pretty good eye for shooting, but there was just a couple of things that I couldn't get right. So it took one or two attempts, and then I did it. So I never passed my advanced rifle handling the first time, and I'm so happy that I didn't because I learned how to shoot properly. And I sometimes worry about guides that they get so excited and they think they're the greatest because they passed their advanced rifle handling the first time. And I'm like, sure. And from training people to become guides and being a range officer, so seeing a lot of people shoot, it was horrifying and also a humbling experience for those that were on the arrogant side about passing their advanced rifle handling the first time, and then watching them do a second attempt in front of other students. Now this is like, they've now got a few months of experience, and they come back and shoot, and then doing or performing really badly. It's just a reminder that, you can shoot. Some days you shoot exceptionally well, and there's also other days where you don't, until you build up that proper muscle memory and you practice regularly. And guides, unfortunately, don't practice shooting regularly enough. And that's something that I think everybody needs to take responsibility for and make sure, so that you are, you've got, your training is at its absolute best. You should have to handle a situation. So that was quite tricky for me, but now I'm happy with it. Okay, right. It's just gone 1 o'clock, which means that we are going to have access to the AfriCam cameras. So let's not waste any more time. Right, we're all the way over in the east coast of South Africa at Tembe Elephant Park, where naturally there are elephants standing in the shade of a big tree, some having a scratch, and a couple of impala enjoying the tasty grass, including a little lamb. So it's quite warm here. You can see how the elephants are all flapping their ears. There'll also be lots and lots of bugs around, so as they flap their ears, they'll disturb all the bugs that are gathering around their eyes, which is after all the moisture. So apparently there's a slight buzz on Tembe. I can't hear it at all. Actually, I can't hear anything. I can't even hear the birds, but they might have turned the ambient sound down. So apologies for that. Where to next? She said, thanks for the lesson on conducting a guided walk and eye-opener as trail guide training. Yeah, it's so... oh, what, you're a trails guide in training? Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, where to next? It's so much fun. Like, I absolutely love being on foot. I love being on foot because you just miss so much from a vehicle. You also don't have the noisiness, the revving of the engine while you're driving around, and also your footprint that you leave behind is much less. There's less impact on the environment when you're out walking about. I mean, elephants are always amazing. When we're doing walks at eco training on WildEarth all those years ago, oh my goodness, the amount of elephant encounters we would have was insane. And more often, for the most part, they were really peaceful, and you could just kind of view them. But I focus on all of the smaller things. But that's of course just me. I like to challenge myself. But if I can give you any advice, it's brush up on your track and sign and understanding how to determine if tracks are fresh or not, and then when you start working in a permanent place, learn your surroundings as quick as you can, because as a guide, that's going to help you. And if you have the opportunity to go out and walk the entire property, you're going to learn the reserve a lot quicker. You might even find some sneaky spots, like where there are water holes, natural forming pools during certain times of the year, and that of course is going to help if animals are on the move, moving through an area. Maybe you find some great trees, or you start to see scratching posts that maybe lions and leopards use regularly. There's all these different things that you can find when you're on foot and not driving around in a car. So it's fun. It's my favorite thing to do, and quite often it's a lot of people's favorite thing to do. Not everybody wants to become a trails guide, and that's okay. But just never get complacent. That's the worst thing on foot, is becoming complacent. You can find yourself in a lot of trouble. And don't be pressured to do things. I've seen some horrible stuff where trainers or other guides are like, no, to other guides, go closer. You don't have to. If you don't want to go closer, you do not have to go closer. Not everybody has to feel the same level of comfort with different animals. So I suppose actually, Canine Girl, going back, one of the hardest things to do with training is the peer pressure that is sometimes put on you by other individuals, and just being strong enough to be able to stand up and say, no, I don't want to do that for X, Y, and Z. I don't feel comfortable. If you say, I don't feel comfortable, that should be enough, and people need to be respectful of that. But it's often hard, because you could be speaking to somebody else that's maybe got 10 years, 15, 20 years experience in the bush, but that doesn't mean that you're at that level yet. And it's also okay. And just don't be like me. I'm not, a lot of times people will say to me, it's not that you're wrong, you're right, but it's the way that you say things. My mouth has gotten me into trouble and still gets me into trouble. So be better than me. Don't word things the way that I do. Just think about what you're going to say first. Alana, you're wondering where I get all the guidebooks that I pull out on Game Drive. Oh my goodness, I search and search for things, and you know where I find some of the best books? It's actually at airports. It's really funny, because I find that, quite often there's an Africa section, and sometimes you'll find field guides, but you can get them online. I suppose it just depends on what you want. Maybe a good start for you is if you head over to the Field Guides Association of Southern Africa, so FAGASA website, and you click bookshop. I think if I'm not mistaken, in order to order a book there, you need to be a member, but you can have a look at their site, and that will give you an idea of some of the common or more popular books with guides. Otherwise, I can kind of give you a list of books for animal behavior. A good one is, although it's a little bit outdated now, is by Dr. Richard Estes, and that's called A Guide to African Animal Behavior. If you want something a little bit more simplistic, he's got another one called Safari Companion, which is great. It's not as scientific, and so that's a nice one to have, but just take it with a pinch of salt. Again, a lot of the information is really outdated. But he was a great animal behavioral specialist in his time. Again, technology has improved. I still find it a good one to read. I like, for a birding book, obviously you get birding field guides, but then you get bird books that talk about behavior. There's one by Rael and Helena Loon, and it's called The Inside Story. That's my favorite. They are both professions and scientists in their own right. There are a lot of books that are written by individuals who are safari guides, but you just have to take that with a pinch of salt. It's their opinion. There's not always scientific evidence to prove what they're saying. Maybe they've had people jump in and stuff, but just remember to do your research on the authors. So that's a goodie. What else is really good? For trees and plants, there's all sorts of books. It just depends on what area you kind of want to work in. That will depend. Now I've got to think. I like a book called, there's one called a Jojo Guide, and then there's another one called Insectopedia, which is great because it just gives sort of general behaviors of insects, which is nice. Some of the field guides, like where you start to look at chameleons or spiders, are also interesting, and don't overlook them. Read the first couple of pages of the book, because quite often they go into detail about life cycles, eyesight, breeding, that type of thing, and people forget to read all that information. And so that's good. I'm just trying to think. One of my favorites is called Pathfinder by sorry, I've forgotten the name of the author now. Lester is her surname. You have to order it directly from her site. That's a great one. It's got a little bit of everything. It's pretty much based on South Africa, though. Another firm favorite of mine, it's also outdated now, though, is Shaping Kruger, but I thoroughly enjoyed reading that book. They talk about the iconic animals of the Greater Kruger National Park, but not, I mean, impala are included, like all these animals that are important for shaping the ecosystem. I'm now trying to think. Lee Guttridge has got some phenomenal books on tracking and trailing. I love his. It's a track and sign basically, but in the bush. But it shows all these little random things that you've gone, what on earth is that? And then he describes it, like if you find a mud ball in a tree, is it an ant's nest or is it made by a wasp, or whatever the case is. So he's got some great ones. And then Lee Guttridge also has another book. I've forgotten what it's called, but it's, oh my goodness, it's kind of like a general book about different things. It includes some plants, it includes birds, reptiles, but the information around it is very nice and easy to digest, which I think is important. It's not always nice to overcomplicate things. Otherwise, honestly, I use the internet a lot now because I am looking for the most recent information. And there's so many new studies that are coming out, and books don't have it. So I always say to guides, especially when I'm training, again, take the books with a pinch of salt, because they are outdated unless it's a brand new print. And you could be repeating information that is no longer relevant. For example, in every single book that you pick up and you read, you're going to see that they talk about giraffe social structures, and they say they've got something called temporary associations, where both sexes come and go. There's no permanent bonding. This is no longer true. There is new evidence that suggests that they have matriarchal systems. So things like that, and then trying to convince people that that's the truth. It's not my job to, though, and I know that a lot of some of my information is updated. So it just requires a lot of work. So you can do that. There's a great site called The Conversation that I use fairly often, where they have a bunch of different research articles, but they explain it in layman's terms.
Are you in search of a unique, unforgettable adventure in the wild? Imagine living with the animals you see on TV while getting an inside look at how a live safari TV show operates. We're thrilled to offer this experience through our 7, 14 and 28-day EcoCam experiences. To book your spot, visit wildearth.tv/EcoCam. Come and join us for the bush experience of a lifetime.
Oh, an interesting one, but like sort of controversial, but also not really. And it's from Catherine, and you said, "At what point should you, as a guest, intervene if you feel your guide is not competent?" Now, your safety is incredibly important, and of course, you're entitled to your opinions. And if you at any point don't feel comfortable, you absolutely have the right to speak up. Again, I think a lot of guests are nervous about doing this. Okay, but before I get into that, Catherine, I'm going to jump onto it now. Let's head over to Jamala and see what those elephants are up to. So just going back to that, it hasn't happened to me, thankfully, but I have been involved where it has happened to some other guides, and I've had to take on guests that were theirs. Um, so it becomes tricky. I mean, at any point, like I said, if you feel unsafe, right? So I try to always ask people, especially seeing that the elephants here, about how comfortable they are with the elephants before and again when we get into a sighting. Because the thing you never want to do is, for example, you never want to make people feel uncomfortable or fear wildlife. That's a complete opposite of what we're trying to do. And guides make this mistake all the time. And I definitely did when I was a younger and less experienced guide, was get allow the animals to get too close to the vehicle, and in fact there's somebody that's completely terrified. You as a guest are allowed to speak up and say, listen, I'm not so comfortable with getting close to elephants, and say that right up front. Don't hesitate, don't worry about what other people are going to think. It's not a problem. You are paying for an experience. You don't have to comply with everybody else, obviously within reason. If you have a phobia or something like that, of course, if you say to your guide you don't like spiders, can you drive the roads that don't have spiders? I've literally had a guest say this to me years and years ago. And I thought, well, now that's going to be impossible, so I kind of make a light-hearted response about it. And what I've done before is when I was working in the reserve that we didn't have trackers, I said, okay, I'm going to tie a stick to the front of the car quite high so that while we're driving, if there are any spider webs, they get caught on the stick, right? That's helping, but I can't not drive in an area where there's no spiders. I don't know where they're going to be. So, you can make some adjustments here and there, and sometimes you chuckle. If you find that maybe your guide is in a state that they should not be driving in, you can say something. If you don't feel comfortable about saying something directly to the guide, then of course, when you're back at camp, you can speak to the lodge manager or the head guide. I would take it up just with the lodge manager. The lodge manager would then speak to the lead guide, and something will happen. So that's a good thing to do. And then I'm trying to just think of another situation. Maybe your guide says, they start racing around or drifting around corners, just because sometimes it can be a little bit fun, but it's also reckless. You can say to them, listen, can we not drive so fast? So I've had that happen to me once, and also again many years ago. We got caught out in the rain in the Eastern Cape, and there was a horrible lightning storm. It was building up in the distance, and I was already making my way back to camp. And there were hail clouds, and this area where we had quite a bit of hail. So I said to the guests, listen, before it starts pouring with rain, I'm going to pick up the pace, and I'm not a fast driver. Like, I get teased all the time for how slowly I drive. And I just said, because I don't want us to get stuck. We're still quite a distance from a lodge, but there's no safe place around here for us to go if we get stuck in the storm. So I drove a little bit quicker. I wasn't breaking reserves, speed restrictions. And about 20 minutes into the drive, also said, listen, we're going to get back. Unless there's something absolutely spectacular, we're just going to go past everything. Not race past it, I'd slow down. And the one guest said to me, halfway through, Taylor, do you mind if you slow down? I'm feeling quite nauseous and uncomfortable. And I said, yes, absolutely. And then I actually invited that guest. I said, come sit in front with me. It's less bumpy. And I said to all the guests, why don't you all move forward? I know it's going to be a bit cramped, but let's maybe try avoid the back row. And of course, it's never nice, I felt embarrassed, and I try to always check on my guests, is everything okay? You don't have to do that every 5 minutes, because that gets, horrible when you're turning around. Everybody, is everyone okay? just that people also enjoy themselves. And I was embarrassed by that. But then obviously there was no animosity between us. It was just a guest requesting something. So that's fine. You must never take like things too personally either. Uh, but yeah, so but again, if you feel uncomfortable at any point, you can say to a guest, I mean, I've had it when I've been on private safaris and stuff with guests, where the guests have actually, before I could even say anything, have jumped in and said to the guide that's driving us, please stop here. We don't need to get any closer. And I try to always, I typically know my guests and what their expectations are. And I try to have lots of discussions with them to just find out what point of view they have. But everybody knows I a stickler for ethics, and I don't need to get super close to everything. And normally my guests are in the same sort of boat. So yeah, so I'll give guides a briefing before, like, listen, so happy to work with you, can't wait. Here's just a couple of things on how I guide, and if we can just try and keep it that way without completely changing their style. But for me, it's normally got absolutely everything to do with ethics. And unfortunately, what I find, and this is probably the truest thing about the safari industry, is our guests will put guides on a pedestal, and we become the best thing ever because you can make or break a person's experience. And sometimes, actually, no, more often than not, the closer wildlife comes to the vehicle, the better your response is from your guests. Okay, not all the time. And then guides think, because they keep getting the same positive reaction from the sightings, like when you train a dog, right, you get a reward every time you do something good. Ours is not necessarily like a reward, like here's a treat, but people make you feel good, like, wow, Taylor, that was the most amazing elephant sighting I've ever had in my whole life. And without thinking, that's how you always start behaving. And and that's not always the right thing. Again, it's not necessarily something that you're doing maliciously. It could be just subconsciously that it's happening. So it's a difficult one. It's so it's so tricky. But speak up. Again, if you can, even just pull the guide aside, maybe when you've stopped for sundowners or something like that. That's maybe better. But again, if you feel the need that you need to announce it while everybody's there, that's also fine. You're allowed to have your say. Caitlin, you've said, would I be able to put a book list on Twitter for you, or X? I can't call it X. Who else? Who else is still calling that app Twitter? So that you'll be able to check it out. Yeah, absolutely, I can. And I don't have many books with me at the moment, but even on the Sunset Safari, I'll pack them because it doesn't look like we're going to have rain. And I'll just show you some of my favorites. I don't have all of them. Unfortunately, my books are still all in storage, and I haven't taken my big bookshelf out yet, the place that I'm living in now. But that is my plan for the new year, is to get it all unpacked. And then even then I can take a short video. At some point, this will be next year, and I can show you all the books that I have. Some I love more, some I don't even open again, but you know what it's like. But yes, I'll definitely do that. But and then I'll put a more comprehensive one, like once I can go through all of the books, because I forget, and then I go, wow, that's a goodie. I forgot about that one.
This immersive program will give you an in-depth understanding of the African bush in as little as 7 days. You'll be guided by expert trainers who will lead you through the various ecosystems of Africa and teach you essential bush skills. Join Eco Training's 7 or 14-day EcoQuest course and you will receive 500 Rand off whether you sign up locally or internationally using this promo code. Further your journey as a true bush enthusiast today.
Film. It's not sequence after sequence. It's taken one thing from one day and then they put it. Then they might take something that they shot 2 weeks later and they put that quite early on. And then they take something that they shot right in the beginning and put it at the end. So it doesn't always tell for me a factual story. So sometimes it really annoys me, to be quite honest. And then the information is not always the most kind of accurate. It's been changed to, yeah, I don't even know how to say it, but anyways, so that's my take on it. Obviously, wildlife shows that you should definitely be watching. Mara Mama's Wild Earth, because it's as true as you're going to get. It's live. It's happening right now. There's no time to go back and edit anything. There's literally just a couple of seconds between what is happening and what you're seeing. So that's why I also really love Wild Earth. There's no creating this illusion. What you see is what you get. But maybe someone else can share with you. I can also ask Jamie. Maybe Jamie will have an idea, but I think she's in the same boat as me. She's just so busy that she doesn't have time to sit and watch TV. And I'm the worst. I forget. I can't even remember what I did this morning, let alone remember the names of the documentaries that I have watched. So I'm sorry that's not very helpful. But if I hear of anybody talking about some great documentaries, I'll definitely pass them on. Jeremy, you're wondering what the reason is for the elephants fighting with each other. So this is a bunch of bulls from what I can see. I'm just looking around to see if I can see any females, and not off the top of my bat. So when you have lots of bulls around, the testosterone fueled individuals is, it's quite something. It's like putting a bunch of 16 to 21-year-old boys in a bar or whatever, in a gym, you name it, just in a situation. There's definitely going to be some altercations between individuals, just because sometimes you can't help it, right? When your hormones are raging, you put your foot in it all the time. So by pushing and shoving one another, this isn't really fighting. We would call it maybe sparring is a better word. So they push and shove one another around, but it's nothing too serious, especially what we've been looking at now. And by doing this, they get out some of their frustrations, right? They're using energy. It also prepares them for when they have to compete for mating rights. And then those fights are serious. You'll know it when you see it. They push vegetation over. The clashing of tusks sounds like gunshots. Like it's quite a thing. Um, so a lot of these younger bulls that are here have also moved away from the breeding herds that they were, once a part of, and I suppose they're trying to find their place within the hierarchy of these bulls. They don't always associate with one another, but when you're around a waterhole like this, it's like a common meeting point, and then they'll interact with one another. And some might go off in a group, and others will go off on their own in their separate ways. So that's basically just it. Like this one now though is playing with a water pipe. So they pump water into this water hole as well, but the rain has topped it up quite nicely, and the elephants love to drink from the fresh water there. What are you doing with your foot? I'd love to see this pipe in person, because they're always fiddling with it like they're trying to pull it off the ground. But the soil's compacted there, thankfully. Otherwise, it would be a disaster. As you can see, he's not interested right now in anything else but cooling himself down and kind of relaxing.
all know the struggle of finding the perfect gift. But what if you could give them an unforgettable experience? Something truly extraordinary. Introducing Nature Eye. Fly a real drone remotely at iconic locations, witnessing the beauty of nature like never before. Sign up to be an explorer and you could win one of these experiences yourself. Visit natureeye.com today.
So Jeremy, no, not Jeremy, sorry, TK Matt, you're asking what are the hills in the background of Madikwe? So I honestly don't know if we're looking north or south at Jamala camera. So those hill, and I haven't ever been to Madikwe either, so this makes it a bit tricky, and I cannot find a perfect map that labels it out. So it could be the Dwarsberg Mountains or Ridge, and they typically form, or they're found in the southern boundary of Madikwe. They run from east to west, or it could be the 2020 hills, and that sort of runs through the center of Madikwe. So it's a little bit tricky to tell. I think it's going to depend on which direction we're actually looking at. So it's one or two of those. So if you find something, please let me know, because I've looked and I can't exactly figure it out, but it's difficult to know which way this lodge is facing. I need to find a more detailed map, which might not be available on the internet, but only to the guides at the lodge. But anyways, thank you so much, everybody. It's been a great spending the morning with you, and I'll be on the sunset safari. So I hope you enjoy the rest of Live at the Waterhole.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to the second half of Live at the Waterhole, where once again we're in the wonderful Madikwe Game Reserve, and specifically at the Jamala Waterhole. Now, my name is Ralph Kirsten, and as per usual, please don't forget that this is a live and interactive experience, so we'd love for you to jump on board with us and send us through your questions and your comments. You can do that by going on the WildEarth website and registering. You can also join the conversation on X, formerly known as Twitter, using the hashtag WildEarth, as well as